Belief, knowledge, and faith are all words having to do with what people perceive to be true about the world. Because they exist in the same domain, people often use these words interchangeably, or they act as if they all mean the same thing, especially in religious circles. You'll often hear religious people trying to claim that an atheist has faith in exactly the same way that they do, and in fact that it takes more faith to be an atheist than a theist. This, for one thing, is ridiculous, and for another thing, is quite odd. Because when theists say this, they're making faith out to be a bad thing, when in any other circumstance they would view it as a good thing. They're undercutting the concept of faith when it's the very same concept that they rely upon. The same person will say, you just have to have faith, and I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, without flinching. So, which is it? Is faith something to be desired, or is it something to avoid? But honestly, that's a topic for a whole other video. What I'm really trying to get at is that when a theist claims that an atheist has faith, often what they're doing is conflating faith and belief. And when it comes to their own faith, they often conflate faith and knowledge, as if that they know what they have faith in is true simply because they have faith in it. Another way that these terms get muddied is when people use the word know when really they're just talking about a belief rather than true knowledge. For instance, when someone says, I knew you were going to do that, or I knew I couldn't trust her. These aren't examples of true knowledge. They're intuition, or educated guesses. So let me clarify the distinction between belief, knowledge, and faith. And I also might as well describe how these three things all relate to truth. A belief is something that we think is true about the world. The dictionary definition is an acceptance that a statement is true or that something exists. Beliefs can be implicit or explicit. An implicit belief is one that you don't hold consciously, also called a non-occurrent belief. An explicit or occurrent belief is one that you do hold consciously. And of course, there's a scale here, because you don't hold all of your explicit beliefs consciously all the time, and they aren't all equally salient in your mind when you are conscious of them. And most of your implicit beliefs can be made explicit under the right conditions. For instance, if someone asks you something like, do you think chairs exist? You've probably always just taken it for granted that chairs exist, and so you've never really had the thought, I believe that chairs exist, in your head. But you will have that thought the moment that somebody asks if you believe in the existence of chairs. But then that belief will probably sink back down into unconsciousness soon after. If belief is a bubble, both knowledge and faith are contained within that bubble. In other words, knowledge and faith are subsets of belief. Knowledge is justified true belief. To have knowledge, you must, of course, have the information in your head, whether explicitly or implicitly. If you don't, then the thing can still be true, you just can't call it knowledge, because you don't know it. That would be something like an undiscovered truth, or, undiscovered to you, anyway. The justified part of knowledge is also important. If you have a true belief, but no justification for that belief, it does not count as knowledge. The recipe for justification is in evidence and/or logic. Justification from evidence is called a posteriori, and justification from logic is called a priori. I won't be using those terms very much in this video, but I just thought you should know them if you didn't already. That's more what they use in formal philosophy settings. Faith is a belief that is not justified, whether true or not. The dictionary definition of faith is complete trust or confidence in someone or something, or strong belief in God or in the doctrines of religion based on spiritual apprehension rather than proof. So faith means a few things, such as having trust in someone. That's not the meaning of the word that I'm talking about in this video, though. I'm more talking about philosophy, epistemology, not just everyday casual usages of words. The meaning I'm focusing on for this video is the rather than proof part, because the word faith, as in that second definition, is often attached to religion, spirituality, or God. But as a concept, I don't think that it necessarily has to be. And faith, in contrast to any other type of belief, because of its complete lack of connection to any proof, is unusually resistant to change. It's quite difficult to change someone's mind on something that is held in spite of a lack of justification. It seems that the beliefs without any justification are the ones that people cling on to the hardest. And to be clear, it's often the case that people believe that they do have justification for these beliefs. People think that they have very good reasons for believing that Jesus was resurrected, for instance. It's a strange thing. In Christian circles, faith is typically portrayed as something good, something you need to have. But at the same time, they like to claim that evidence and logic are on their side. If evidence and logic were on their side, they wouldn't need faith. And the desire for evidence and logic seems to me to be in conflict with the concept of faith. I mean, Christians look down on doubting Thomas for needing physical proof that Jesus was resurrected. Blessed are they that have not seen and yet believed, and all that. The desire for evidence and logic is in contradiction with their whole doctrine. And yet I've often found the most common and persistent reason for people's religious belief is personal experience. They think that they have seen. However, what I've also found is that when you question these people, they end up appealing to faith at some point, basically throwing all their claims of evidence and logic out the window. And a subset of faith is delusion. Delusions are false beliefs. The dictionary definition is an idiosyncratic belief or impression that is firmly maintained despite being contradicted by what is generally accepted as reality or rational argument, typically a symptom of mental disorder. But not all false beliefs are delusions. For instance, you could have a seemingly justified belief that turns out to be false. Maybe something like believing that the Earth is the center of the universe. That was a fairly reasonable thing to believe before Aristarchus of Samos came along. But to believe in the geocentric model after it has been disproven is delusional. The geocentric model might once have been justified given the available evidence, but now there is new evidence, making it unjustified, or at the very least, less justified than its competition. If two ideas contradict each other, and one of them has more justification, the only intellectually responsible thing to do is to accept the better justified idea over the other one. Which is why many religious ideas can be safely considered delusions, like believing in young Earth or creationism. So, beliefs can be justified or unjustified, explicit or implicit, and true or false. And for all these categories, I would describe them as analog rather than binary. Something can be partially justified, or more justified than something else. Something can be halfway between implicit and explicit. And something can be more true than false, but still not completely true, or something's truth value can be unknown. But to simplify it, you could arrange this chart. Belief is the whole chart. Knowledge is what's justified and true. Faith is what's unjustified. Delusions are what's false, and not only just false, but known to be false by others. And facts are what's justified and true, but not necessarily a belief. So the domain of fact extends beyond this chart into what you don't know. Another way to imagine it is if truth is a bubble, and belief is another bubble, and justification is a third bubble. Then knowledge is the intersection between all of these bubbles. Faith lies inside the belief bubble, but outside the justification bubble. And delusions lie inside the belief bubble, but outside both the truth and justification bubbles. There are also what are called brute facts, or basic beliefs in epistemology. A brute fact is a fact that cannot be explained in terms of a deeper, more fundamental fact. They are the base layer of facts with seemingly nothing beneath them. They defy proper explanation, but must simply be accepted. An example of a brute fact is that matter exists. There is no satisfying explanation as to why or how, but it does. Those with a religious leaning will be tempted to compare brute facts with objects of faith. However, there is an important and rather obvious difference. Brute facts can be observed, so they are still justified because they can be directly witnessed. Though brute facts might be a bit less justified than other facts, because they're justified through evidence, but not through logic. Objects of faith, on the other hand, cannot be observed. So the existence of the universe is a brute fact, but the claim that the universe exists because God made it is faith. We have evidence that the universe exists all around us, but we have no evidence that God made it. So faith is neither justified through evidence nor through logic, failing on both counts. Over the eons, many have acknowledged the lack of evidence for their faith, and so have attempted to justify their faith in logic, a priori, but these attempts have not yet been successful. By the way, contained here is the issue of foundationalism versus coherentism, where the existence of brute facts coincides with foundationalism, which many religious people reject, instead opting for coherentism. But coherentism has its issues. I won't discuss that now, it would make this even longer of a video, but I thought that I should mention it just to let you know that I am aware of it. Perhaps I'll make a video on that subject in the future. So you might wonder where opinions fit in here. The dictionary definition of opinion is a view or judgment formed about something, not necessarily based on fact or knowledge, or an estimation of the quality or worth of someone or something. So opinions are beliefs that have to do with value judgments, and are not necessarily in any way linked to knowledge. They're based on preference, which means that not all beliefs are opinions, such as the belief that we live in the eye of a blue-eyed giant named Macumba. That would feel weird to call it an opinion. It doesn't have anything to do with a value claim, so it's a belief. If unjustified, it's faith. If justified and true, it's knowledge. But the belief that chocolate ice cream is better than vanilla ice cream is an opinion. In fact, you could almost say the thing that makes opinions opinions are that they have really nothing to do with truth. They're outside the domain of truth. So it's kind of invalid to say that an opinion is true or false. If something can be falsified, then it's not an opinion. However, it's probably more accurate to say that opinions have nothing to do with objective truth, but they still have to do with truth. An opinion is what you believe to be true about yourself. If you really do prefer chocolate ice cream, then it is true that you prefer chocolate ice cream. Of course, you can lie about your opinions. But if you say that you prefer chocolate ice cream when really you don't, the statement about your opinion is false, but your opinion itself is still true. Because even though you didn't express it accurately, your ice cream flavor preference still exists, whatever it is. And if you have no ice cream flavor preference, then your opinion on it isn't false, it just doesn't exist. So really, the only way an opinion can be false is if there's self-deception or forgetting involved. You think your favorite ice cream is chocolate when really it's pistachio. One thing that's often troublesome about opinions is how easily they can slide into the domain of fact, and thus are no longer opinions, without people realizing it. Take the statement, "That joke isn't funny." If, when you say that, you mean that you don't think that joke is funny, then it's an opinion. But too often, people make statements like this, but rather than just keeping the claim about their own preferences, they implicate other people into the value judgment. If a statement involves your own preference, it's an opinion. If a statement involves the opinions of others, then it's a statement of fact, or lack thereof. Because preferences can be measured. So if you mean that nobody thinks that joke is funny, or most people don't think that joke is funny, now you stand the chance of actually being wrong. All you have to do is survey the populace to see what percentage of people think the joke is funny. In fact, the same is true of the initial opinion statement I gave. Chocolate ice cream is better than vanilla ice cream. That could mean that you like it better, or that could mean that you think everyone likes it better. One statement is an opinion, and the other is not. This facts-opinion problem is pervasive in the realm of political discourse. For instance, look at the statement, universal healthcare is bad. It's a value judgment, so at first glance, it might seem like an opinion. But it depends on what you mean by bad. If it's simply that you wouldn't like it, then yeah, it's an opinion. But if you mean that universal healthcare would be bad for other people's health or happiness, for the economy, for medical professionals, etc., well, that's no longer just a matter of personal preference. It can be proven whether universal healthcare would increase or decrease the well-being of other humans. And while opinions deal entirely with subjective attitudes, there still exists a spectrum of justification here. An opinion can be well-informed, or it can be misinformed, or it can be uninformed, or anywhere in between. The degree to which you personally like universal healthcare can depend heavily on facts, or it can depend on no facts at all. Not all opinions are of equal quality. For a more trivial example, someone's favorite ice cream flavor might be chocolate. But wouldn't you agree that that opinion means less coming from someone who has only ever tried chocolate ice cream compared to someone who has tried a multitude of ice cream flavors? Before, when I said that religious people, when denigrating atheist faith, were conflating faith with belief, this is what I meant. Their belief is unjustified. There is no logical or empirical backing for it. After all, that's why they fall back on the necessity of faith, because they can't explain themselves any other way. So no logical or empirical backing for what they believe. They sometimes claim the same of atheists. But an atheist is not using faith. they're simply relying on brute facts. They have empirical knowledge that the universe exists, and make no claims about why or how, at least usually. Additionally, there is a difference between an unjustified belief and a justified belief that might be false. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a word for a justified belief of unknown truth value. It's true to say that an atheist might be wrong about what they believe, but at least they, generally speaking, have some justification for what they believe. And further, a theist might claim that an atheist relies on unfounded assumptions just as much as a theist does. And part of that is true. The assumption that the material world is all there is, for example. But still, I would argue with the just as much as a theist part. Assumptions or axioms can't be escaped, but not all assumptions are equally reasonable or justified. There's a very important thing to consider when comparing assumptions or axioms, and that is their parsimoniousness. In other words, how much do they assume? It's true that the assumption that the material world is all there is might fall afoul of Hume's problem of induction, that if every swan you ever see is white, that it is not logically valid to claim that all swans are white, unless you've seen all swans. Perhaps all swans thus far have been white, but you might come across a black swan. This happened actually in real life. It was assumed for a long time that whiteness was part of what makes a swan, but then black swans were discovered in Australia in 1697. In the same way, you could make an argument that the assumption that the material world is all there is invalid because we haven't surveyed all there is. Which is why I think it's important to be fluid in your beliefs. Rather than holding the assumption that the material world is all there is as fixed and concrete, it makes much more sense to hold it as a working assumption. I'll believe that's all there is until I see evidence to the contrary and then revise my beliefs. But compare this assumption to the popular alternative religious/spiritual assumption that there is a non-material component to the world. Perhaps something like heaven, or a realm of pure consciousness, or a spirit world. This would be like assuming that pink swans exist when all you've ever seen are white swans. We have evidence of a material world all around us, and not of a non-material world. So to assume that there is a non-material world is more of an assumption than to assume that there isn't one. Either assumption could be wrong, but we're more justified in going with where the evidence leads. Plus, that's not all most religious people assume. The list of assumptions goes on. There is a non-material world. There is a God. God created the universe. God is good. God cares about us. We go to this non-material world when we die. Maybe. Etc. Pink swans, green swans, blue swans, fucking rainbow-colored swans. Many people treat the words faith and belief as if they're interchangeable, when I would suggest that they are not. What's important to consider is that it may not be possible to ever know if you've attained the truth. You can have an idea that seems to conform to reality in every way and never be proven wrong. But how could you ever know that it isn't wrong in some small or even large way that just hasn't come up yet? So knowledge is the goal. And we can use the word knowledge in a more casual way and claim to have it when our beliefs are very, very good approximations of the truth. But we can't ever really, with ultimate confidence, claim that we have knowledge. If by knowledge we mean justified, true belief. The best we can do is a justified belief that we believe is true. So in that sense, the best we can practically do is have beliefs. And if belief was indistinguishable from faith, then all we'd have is faith. Some people claim that is all we can have. But I think there's a very important distinction to be made in whether we're using real-world evidence and/or solid reasoning to justify our beliefs or not. Not all beliefs are equal. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, then please be sure to like, subscribe, or comment, or all of the above. All those things would really help me out. And also, if you like this video, feel free to check out my other videos that I have. I've got a few that are on other philosophical topics or topics involving atheism or religion. Anyway, enjoy the rest of your day. See you next time.